Alrighty, let's get started. Thanks so much for everybody that's here. I am the Director of Content Marketing at BuzzStream. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nero. I've been doing this for a while. I've been with BuzzStream for 2 years, but I've been in the industry. I worked at different agencies for about 10 years. And yeah, down with BuzzStream. And today we're going to be talking about why hyper-relevance wins in digital PR. I'm going to start out here by telling you that digital PR is super easy. You probably don't even need to listen to this webinar. All you really have to do these days, get one of these city studies, something like this. You're going to blast it out to 3,000 people. Heck, for a large index-based study like this LinkedIn post is telling me, I could send it out to 10,000 people, and you're just going to sit back and watch those links roll in, right? If I was on stage, this is where I'd walk off. But look, we know it's not that easy. Digital PR is getting tougher for more people. That's why you're all here, hopefully. And I want to start with telling you a quick story. So we had a customer come to us and they were looking to do the same exact thing that I just laid out, that same scenario. They were following what they saw online on LinkedIn, and they wanted to send out thousands of emails per day for their campaigns, and they were just going to sit back and watch the links roll in because that's how easy it sounds. But before they could even get anything sent out, they were banned by their email provider. And they changed up their tactics a little bit, but ultimately they were banned by Google. We talked to them a little bit about trying to get more focused, but they weren't able to do it, and they were banned by Google. It's fun to really call out these blatantly wrong decisions and blatantly wrong tactics and strategies that I think a lot of people are taking. But the fact of the matter is, the people that even think they're being relevant and targeted are not being relevant and targeted enough. And we analyzed 31 million emails to prove that. We found that the smaller, more targeted campaigns outperform these large generic blasts by a great margin, and I'll get into it. And I promise I'm going to come back to that story because there's a happy ending to that customer. The reason that I think many of us are finding this stuff challenging is that the old strategies are just not working. We've had plenty of customers come to us at BuzzStream saying, last year I used to send out stuff. I used to do these campaigns and send out these campaigns, and I would get 100 links. But nowadays you're getting 3, 5, 10, maybe if you're lucky. So the old strategies are not working. And if you are feeling this, you are not alone. In our State of Digital PR report, we found 71% of people said that it's more challenging. We're going to be doing another one of these at the end of the year, in probably a month, and I'm looking to see, I'm curious if this is going to go up even more. Now, when things get tough, the urge, I think, is to send more emails. If you're not getting responses, you're not getting links, you feel like you need to spray, right? The spray and pray. You need to expand your reach, but that is just not the case. We are seeing that more people are doing this. Sends are up 18% since 2023. And I think it used to be this easy. You would go into a media database, you do some search, like I'm looking for tech journalists here. I do a tech search, find people in their bios and make this big list. You could maybe go into Twitter, do the same thing, look at their bios, and you find journalists, and you could export these lists and blast it out, and you would get results, but just not how it works these days. There's a couple of reasons for this. I think one, and I'm sure all of you are aware, news sites are cutting journalists, right? So there's this shrinking pool of journalists, and the ones that remain are overworked. They're jumping around. They're covering a lot more beats, a lot more areas. And on the other side of the coin, as people are realizing now, all these studies are coming out that AI, PR is the way into AI citations. We're seeing this massive increase in interest in digital PR. We're seeing so many agencies. My end, I'm seeing people who were link building agencies are now positioning themselves as digital PR. And there's a lot of people looking for digital PR services on the same end of the coin. So it's this shrinking pool of journalists and a lot more people in the space. And what that's adding to is just the pitches here. We're seeing 15% more pitches according to Muckrack. And this is the kicker here. Half of the journalists seldom or never get relevant pitches. That's from Muckrack's State of Journalism. So this should really tell you all you need to know about the state of the industry right now. And I think a lot of people that are doing this still, a lot of people that think they're being relevant, I think the issue is we typically spend, say you're sending 100 emails, we typically spend most of the time in these kind of 10 VIPs, right? We're going to really find the ones that we know are the best fit. And then you fill out the rest of the list with these people might answer, they might not. What's the big deal? I think there's a couple of repercussions. On the one hand, journalists are going to mark you as spam, going to ignore you. They're getting more frustrated as the days go on, as if you follow them online. You can see this happening in real time. But there's also other repercussions. Google, Yahoo, and now Outlook this year have all rolled out these penalties for people doing these generic email blasts. They call them bulk senders, right? So at the worst case scenario, you're going to get banned, which obviously is not what we want as PRs. So let's talk a little bit about this. We need to be more targeted than we think. Let's look at the data. I want to show you, we did this big study and found that the smaller, more targeted campaigns had 16% better open rates. Now, you may be rolling your eyes at open rates, right? Because it can sometimes not be indicative of success. But we also found 68% higher reply rates. And again, not all journalists reply. I understand that. But I think the thing that most people come back to is the coverage, right? That's what we're all here for. So 17 times more links. And this is not even including coverage, right? Which I would expect it to be even higher. So people that are sending these smaller, more targeted campaigns are getting 17 times more links. And I don't want you to take away here from this that the smaller lists equal better, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can just cut your list in half. I think the issue here is it typically takes a long time to build these more targeted, relevant lists, so they tend to be smaller. The takeaway is that the targeted and relevant list, that's what we need to be focusing on. So takeaway 3 here that I want everybody here to take is this idea that relevance is not what you think it means anymore. We need to be more relevant. You need to really wrap your heads around what this means. So I'm going to give you a little inside scoop here. I'm going to introduce you to Rosie Taylor. She is a fantastic journalist. She was on our podcast. Definitely check it out. She has an amazing Substack newsletter, which I'll share with you all, called Get Featured. And she's a award-winning journalist that specializes in health and consumer topics, particularly issues that affect women and families. Now, remember that, women and families, health and consumer, because what I'm going to do here is show you her inbox. And I'll just give you, put yourself in Rosie's shoes. If you are a journalist that covers health, consumer topics, specifically about families and women, I'm going to give you a few seconds. Just look at this, scan this in the same way that Rosie might, and tell me which ones, how many maybe are relevant. Count how many you think are relevant. All right. So it was my guess, about 5. I see some stuff in here, rural college of nursing, and there's medical related things in here. But realistically, when I asked Rosie about this, it was no. Okay. And the reason is nothing in that inbox had anything to do with women specifically. And when I talked to her, she showed me some of the content, right? And you can clearly see her content has to do with women's. And not only that, she actually explained to me that the type of journalism she does is writing exclusive news and features. So none of this was really pitched to her exclusively. And if you dig into her content, you do see this. Here, you see this line, the independent can reveal. And none of this stuff is something you'd find on a media database, right? I don't see anything in here about women, specifically women and families, right? I see health and consumer, but nothing about women, nothing about the exclusives. So that's important. And let's break down these relevance types. And these are kind of things that you need to be thinking about. There's topical, timing, geo, and format. So let's pretend I first did this deck. We were in San Diego, so tacos were on the brain. Let's pretend you have a client, you're doing something about taco trends, right? Some fun studies, some survey, data analysis. Now let's talk about topical relevance. So if I'm pitching this, I'm maybe looking for someone who's covering food. So I'm looking at San Diego Eater. Here's someone that came up in a search, Mona Holmes. She covers James Beard Awards. This, to me, is too broad. James Beard Awards, yes, they have to do about food, but what you'd really rather go for is someone like Kim Smith. She's covering why avocado sales are down, a study about why avocado sales are down. This is hyper relevant. Okay, this is the topic that you want to get into. You need to dig deeper than just the surface level topic relevancy. Let's get into geo relevance. So here's someone covering food news on CNBC, Jane Smith, America's top 10 fast food chains. Now, fast food chains in America, this is a pretty big net, right? She's going to be covering a broader scope from a geo perspective. I would much rather reach out to Jeff Cox here, who's covering Southern California's surprising fast food, covering food in Southern California. There may be some taco trends in here that are relevant to him in this Southern California. And that's where tacos are definitely a big thing. So matching it from a geo perspective. Next is timing. So tax day food deals. We all know these kind of social media days that we try to hook onto. And this is not the kind of stuff that you want to necessarily anchor to because it's going to be too broad. He's talking about food deals, but it has nothing to do with tacos. Really, what we want are the Taco Day, right? National Taco Day. This might be a much more relevant piece for someone like Mike Snyder. Lastly, this is the most important concept, and actually Rosie Taylor, who I mentioned earlier, just had a whole piece on this from her newsletter. We want to match the format. So here's Noelle from Tasting Table. It's a relevant publication for a taco trends piece. And here, Noelle, she tends to cover these guides, right? This is like a listicle, 25 best tacos in San Diego. That's not what we want. We would much rather pitch this to someone like Martha, who covers news, popular Midwest chain files for bankruptcy. We want to give her the scoop on this, breaking trends or breaking news. That's what Martha seems to be really covering, right? So there is a big difference, and that type of thought process is going to help you hone in and cut down your list. So now I'm going to show you some real life examples. I had a chance to speak with the great team over at Fractal, and they shared with me this one piece that they did. It's like a survey piece covering GPU preferences. So they really nerded out on brand trust, budget limits. You could see some of the stuff that they got. What's the most important factor when choosing a GPU? What sources do you trust when choosing a GPU? Very GPU related. And Kip shared with me the template here, and you could see there's a big focus on this in their template. And he told me the way that they did this, the way that they really broke down their list was they looked at relevant publications and then do a site search to hone in on the right journalists. And I love this approach. But there are some caveats here. If you're doing this, not every writer is going to cover third-party studies. So like here, I did a site search for gamer GPU, and I could see a lot of people, but a lot of these are reviews, right? This is not the it's not the format that we want. Some people only cover these product releases or reviews, like I said. One person they found, however, John Martindale, covers third-party studies, dug in on his research here, on his coverage in PC World, but also some third-party other sites, because he's more of a contributor freelancer. And you could see that's the person who ultimately ended up covering their piece, right? Third-party, the guy that's covering third-party studies. That is the important takeaway. The results here, they sent about 53 emails total for this campaign and got almost the same amount of links, and coverage. Pretty impressive. All right, next is Olivia Lott. She's a fantastic PR in the UK. And Olivia shared this piece with me. It's called The Quietest Places in the World's Loudest Cities. And typically with this type of thing, you're going to pitch to local journalists in these cities. You could see here a lot of the cities that made the list, Spokane, Edinburgh, Phoenix, they have these particular areas in the city that are super quiet. So you'd reach out to these local journalists. So here, when I'm doing the research, I'm looking at people that cover these types of best cities. So here's Mims Copeland, and she's covering things like the best aviation museums, the best barbecue joints, best ice cream. And ultimately, Mims is the person that covered Olivia's piece here. And a funny kind of twist on this, she got coverage here in the Oregonian, as you can see. She also, that led to this newsletter, PDX Today, which is part of this 6 a.m. network. And Olivia actually told me about this here. So basically, once she found out that the 6 a.m. newsletter was kind of part of a network, she reached out to the editor and asked if they wanted findings for all of the cities they covered. So you can see it's a lot more than just the Portland area. So Olivia actually went in and created all this big data set for all the different areas that they cover. And she was able to get a lot more coverage. So this type of like personalized outreach, I'd love to see it, because this is the kind of hard work that it really takes to get these kind of results. And you could see 150 links overall, or more than that, but 25 emails per city, no more than that. So I think that, again, speaks to this hyper-relevance, hyper-targeting that's happening. Next, Colin Zarnicki from Nope. Colin shared a piece, cities with the largest gender pay gaps. And I'm sharing a lot of these like city-related studies because not only are they super popular, but there are different takes on these. And I like to see the strategies that people are using. So this is, again, a typical city index study. You could see the people here, cities with the largest pay gaps. But you're not just spraying and praying to everyone that's in Frisco, for instance, or Cary or Irvine. What you're doing is trying to find reporters who have a history in covering these same types of topics. And Colin here is showing me that. She's covering gender equity, labor, metro cost of living. And she shared with me the template here. And you can see there's this piece here that says Equal Pay Day, with Equal Pay Day coming up on March 12th. So here we go. I did a quick Equal Pay Day study, Google search, with the custom date range set to last year. And boom, here's this guy, Chris Morris. He covered Equal Pay Day, actual international Equal Pay Day. It was slightly different, but same concept last year. And lo and behold, this is the same Chris Morris that covers Colin's piece this year. So that, again, that's the type of kind of timing relevance maybe that you want to work into. I also like this. I wanted to call out, he does this kind of hyper target breakdown based on people's time zones, which I think is genius because, as we know, not everybody is in the same time zone, especially when you're doing these city studies. So you're sending something at 9 o'clock to someone from the East Coast, it's going to get to them at 6 a.m. on the West Coast, and so on and so forth. Big ups to Colin here, as Olivia says. Results, 70 plus links, but ultimately about 30 emails per angle, which is pretty killer. All right, last one. I'm going to share this piece from Rise at 7. Not only do they do great work, but this one is near and dear to my heart as a huge baseball fan. The Major League Looks. So they did this kind of fun study and where they basically came up with this list of the best looking mascots and managers in the US. And the way that Madeline talked to me or told me they did this was basically the same thing that you would do for a city study, local journalists, but also national reporters. And they're specifically focusing on the culture and trending. So I want to now, they also took it a step further. What I want to call out here is the personalization for each local team and stadium, because I think this is very important. As you can see, here's a little snippet of their template. You can see specifically This is the one from Milwaukee. Milwaukee Brewer named one of the sexiest mascots. Bernie the Brewer, he's their mascot. So this is super targeted to that specific person in Milwaukee. And you can see when you jump into the different templates here, they have one for everybody on this list, right? Seattle's Mariner Moose, Wally Green Monster, and my favorite here, I'm a big Phillies fan, so Philly Fanatic. A little sad that he came in second place, as you can see. I lost to Baxter, which I'm pretty bummed about. But let's go into how they did it, right? Here's someone, Fox 29 Philadelphia. Okay, so I'm reaching out to somebody in the Philadelphia area, finding these news stations. And here's someone from Philadelphia, Amanda Hurley, who is covering news in the Northeast news sector, consumer, regional news. And so here's my target. And it helps that she clearly also covers Phillies related news. You can see looking at the related articles right there. So that's the hook. And ultimately, she covered the story, lo and behold. So again, this is like a geo targeting, but also topical targeting. When you're talking about this relevance, that's the type of thought process you need. And digging into it, I wanted to highlight about 49 emails sent for this Philly area specifically, 19 links. I think that's pretty solid. Overall, the piece got about 60 links. Still cooking too. And this was sent right around the playoffs. So for a lot of people, this is going to be a mindset shift, okay? Because it takes a lot to do this type of thing. And for us, this is a mindset shift for BuzzStream. We are putting some pretty big bets that this is the way future, and I'll get into it, but creating new products for this type of outreach, getting away from the big blast that bulk sends, because we see how helpful it is. And we also see on the other side how challenging, we hear from people how challenging it is every day to do what they're doing. And we're getting less returns on the same type of outreach. So I want you to reject these pieces of advice, I guess we could call them. They're telling you to send 1 million emails a day, bragging about the millions of emails, because this is just not the way. This is adding more noise. We have these conversations in-house too. It's like, why aren't more people doing it this way? If it seems so simple, right? You just got to get more focus. I think the biggest thing might be if there's more junior people working and you're just trying to hit numbers because that's the way that you scale this. But ultimately, I think it just comes down to time. And we are most of the people that are doing this are agency, and in agencies, we're so dependent on the time spent and hours, deliverable hours, and that sort of thing. But this takes time, right? So say I wanted to do some type of reactive piece around these flight cancellations that are happening in the US, right? So I do a news search for canceled flights, flight cancellation. And if I'm trying to do a reactive piece, I'm clicking into each of these. I am looking for the author. I'm reading the article. Here's Alex. I'm going to learn some more about Alex. Now I'm going to read Alex's bio, understand what he covers. Is he a good fit? Can I pitch him my reactive piece? Then I'm going to read all of his recent articles, scan through here, and 4 might not be enough. You might need to go 10, 20, depending on how frequently this person covers. Then you're digging around to try to find the email, because email wasn't on the bio page, right? So now I'm doing some search like this, and you're going down a rabbit hole, opening 1,000 tabs. For everyone who's done this can take a lot of time. Then you're digging back. Okay, I found Alex, maybe not. Then I'm going to go to the next one and dig around, repeat the same process. That can easily take 10 minutes per journalist. And if you're doing 100 journalists, that's a handful of days time, right? So here's where I'm clearly going to show you the product that we have to help solve this problem. And I am really excited about this. I wish I had this when I was doing my own research and outreach. So this is ListIQ. Say we're doing this reactive workflow again. Got our flight cancellation. I'm in Google News search. I enable ListIQ, and I'm going to tell ListIQ which of these publications to look at, which of these URLs I want it to analyze. I can click and toggle all of them, or click specifically ones that I specifically want. Then I'm going to go over to ListIQ and say, okay, now I want the search summary. I want to know their activity check. Are they still active at the publication? I want to know their bio, their job title. Obviously, I want to know their email address. I want some recent articles. Then I click create sheet. It's going to go and do this heavy lifting for me. And boom, I have a Google Sheet now with article author for each of these. I have their email address, and these are verified email addresses, by the way. That's a big differentiator here. This is not a hunter. We're not just guessing and doing pattern matching, because as we've seen in a lot of our studies, stuff just doesn't work, especially for journalists. We have activity check, so we can see if they're still active within the past 30 days of their publication. Are they still publishing things? This is especially obviously important for reactive. Then we see their bio, and here I can clearly pick out Alex here. He covers breaking news. Here's Josh. He covers transportation and political issues. Right, there we go. Boom. There's our connection. Travel issues. Boom. There's Leslie, and so on. So we also have recent articles. And all this to show that this is what it takes to do. This is the targeted outreach, right? This is what we need. This is how you need to be thinking. This is what List IQ is all about, but this is also what we need to do to succeed. And everyone here at this webinar, we're going to give access to List IQ. You can get on there now. Just go to buzzstream.com/ListIQ. You can ping me on LinkedIn and let me know you want access. But I'm going to follow up with all of you and let you get some extra credits, a demo if you need. I'm happy to run people through their teams through how to use this stuff. But also, you want me to build you a list? I'm happy to do that too, just to get you started and show you how much better this type of thing could be. This is the way. Now, I said I was going to come back to that story from the very beginning, because it does have a happy ending. So remember these people that got banned from their email providers and whatnot? We talked to them and showed them the data, right? You could see before a lot of their campaigns, these were individual templates, 490 cent, 892 cent, 25% open rate, no responses, no links, no clicks. And after we walked them through what it really takes to do this targeted outreach, they're seeing way better turns, clicks, applies, better open rates, and clearly a lot smaller, more targeted media lists. So I said that this was tough and it is a mindset shift. I want to share a handful of people that I think you should be following. Britt Klontz, she has a fantastic podcast, the Digital PR Explained podcast. And the reason I really like Britt's work is because she, in a lot of her episodes, they might go a full episode on one piece of coverage, and the amount of time and effort it took for someone to score one piece of big coverage. And I think, again, we have to get back into that mindset as digital PRs. We need to steal some of this mindset from the traditional side of things. Rosie Taylor, as I mentioned, she's a great Substack. She was the journalist mentioned in this deck. It's called Get Featured. She is a journalist, but she also does this kind of side project where it's just tips on how to get yourself featured, how to get coverage. Colin Zarnicki, I mentioned his piece of content, but he also has a great newsletter called Pitched, where Colin was a former journalist as well. So he has some fantastic ideas around that. Mark Rofe, he's an OG in the space, especially in the UK. He has a digital PR newsletter. It goes out about twice a month. And of course, the BuzzStream podcast and newsletter. Got to give myself a shout out there for that. And I appreciate everybody who sends me their tips and stuff for this the newsletter. All right, here we go. We got questions. Let me start here because I have a handful of questions that people had asked and submitted. So let me open this up. Okay, it's not a ton. So the first one was just more about what hyper-relevance looks like. And I think we covered that. The next one was about how this stuff takes a lot of time and trying to scale this hyper-relevance besides using List IQ. And I think a lot of, and this is part of the feedback, the question here was that a lot of clients come into this stuff with a very high expectations. The tough part here is, yes, having these conversations with a client that you are going to expect fewer pieces. And I think I've done a lot of research and I can share some of this stuff with people and hopefully this helps. But I think the expectations do need to be lower for clients these days. And I think there are fewer links to go around. I've done a lot of research on this, the value of a link, the cost for a link, but not only cost, but the value because of the cost, it has bumped up extremely high. And there's some studies that I've done looking at if you were to go buy these links on a marketplace. Some people are charging for high-end news links like this $10,000, which is insane to me, but that gives you a sense for what you should be expecting. And I think it's totally reasonable to show and compare some of these things with potential clients. But all that said, like at the end of the day, you need results, right? So what are some ways to think about this outside of just list IQ, which obviously is a good piece of this, right? But I think there's this acronym I've been working on, this FIT acronym, to things to look at, and it follows that there's hyper relevance, but you want to make sure they're in the right industry. And that's something that you could do, I think, as a general sweep, just based off of a category. Say you're going to a website, you look under the categories that you want first and finding a journalist that way. Site searches, I think, work really well. Just you go to the specific site and do a site colon and then write the site in and then the specific keywords that you're looking for. But I think the bios and recent articles are really going to tell you what you want, because you're going to be able to match that kind of topical relevance, but also for the most part, you're going to be able to get some of that format relevance too. So you're going to be able to understand types of articles that these people are looking at, the types of articles they share. And another big piece of this, I think, is the search operators that can help. So when you're thinking about search operators, you want to be thinking about the types of headlines that you might be getting for the piece that you are pitching. So for instance, the example I use a lot is, say you did a general study for US audience. If I were to search most Americans, typically that is how journalists a lot of the times will share a survey. And so my go-to search query for that is most Americans plus whatever topic, most Americans plus flights. If I did a study around flight times, missed flight times or whatever, delays at airports. There's also new survey reveals. Look for these key phrases that are going to help you uncover journalists who have covered the same type of content, the same format that you are pitching. Okay. There is another question on here. Is it best to send emails directly from Outlook, Gmail, etc.? Now, dug into this a bit. I think all of them at this point have very similar restrictions and spam guidelines. So it really depends on how you're doing it and who you're reaching out to. But at the end of the day, any type of bulk sending, I think, is going to get you flagged from your providers. So it doesn't seem like there's any deliverability or open rates that are better from one platform to the next. It is all really pretty similar. It really varies depending on the person behind the emailing. So I would take all of those. If you ever see studies like that, I would take those with a grain of salt, because two people could be sending from Gmail and one of them is blasting out emails and the other one is doing a great job, and that's going to skew the data in a big way. Okay, cool. Let me check on the chat here to see if we have any questions in the chat. All right. Did the PR pros give some tips or insights on how they specifically find the right journalists? Do they use tools like Muckrack? Do they manual search? What do you recommend for smaller in-house teams? Yeah, great question, Mina. I covered this a little bit. I think for the most part, a lot of people do still try to use media databases. The issue, I think, is there are some that are just not as accurate as others. So I think thinking about how you use it, I would still recommend doing a deeper search, like maybe use a media list to gather close people, but you still have to go through and evaluate them based off of like recent articles, the types of articles. A media list, like we said, does not show that kind of stuff, the format. So you do need to get in there. And that's why anytime I've ever built a list, it's always from scratch. It's because I feel if you're using a media database, you're ending up doing a lot of that same extra work. And yeah, so the tips and insights for finding the right journalist, I'd say look for those cues and clues based off of their recent articles and stuff they've written in the past. And I appreciate, Olivia, you had a great piece of advice in here. Let's see. Tamara, The Tool, List IQ, BuzzStream. Yeah, cool. Does anybody else have any questions? You feel free to throw them in the chat right now. I'll wait a few minutes, but it doesn't look like it. Here we go. I'm going to try again to highlight myself as the host, pin myself. I'm not sure if this pinned myself for everybody else, but that's it for today. Thank you all so much for joining. This has been awesome. Yeah, people have questions about this stuff. The best solution for any of this is to talk it out. I feel like if you have problems, I feel like the digital PR community especially on LinkedIn, is pretty amazing. Everybody is welcoming, open, and answer questions. And I would say throw questions on there. I just did an AMA on Digital Olympus, has a great kind of newer digital PR community on their Slack channel. I'll follow up with links for this stuff. But my door is also always open. And like I said, I'm going to follow up with everybody that was part of this webinar today for this type of feedback and advice. If you need it, definitely reach out. If you want to check out List IQ, download it. A free trial can get you started, but I will hook you up with more if you need it. And like I said, I will also hook you up with your first list, a demo if you need to walk your team through this process I outlined here. That is what it's all about. I feel like we will benefit, all of us will benefit from this type of outreach, because journalists are getting bombarded, and it helps us all if we're doing it in a better, smarter way. All right. Thanks everyone for showing up, and stay tuned for the next one.